I'll use my microphone also. This is my 4th time saying welcome. We appreciate everyone coming on the roads today, and we're sorry for the late start due to some of the road conditions, but we're happy to have everyone here. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at 9:35 this morning. And we have our land acknowledgement by Trustee Long. We are ready for you. Just a reminder for everyone to use their microphones, and when you are not speaking, to please turn them off.
Okay, hello. Welcome to our division office, located on the traditional land and territory of the Niitsitapi, Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika, the Blackfoot people, within the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta.
Thank you so much, Trustee Long. We'll now invite everyone to stand for the singing of O Canada. Playing. Thank you very much. That was a very peppy version today. Okay, so I'm going to ask if there's someone to make a motion around the consent agenda. The recommendation is that the January 18th, 2022 consent agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Hodges. Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone that needs to pull anything out of the consent agenda at this time? Yes, Trustee Gimber?
The professional development, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We will take the professional development and add it into F4, professional development. Is there anything else that anyone wants pulled at this time? No? Okay, perfect. So all in favor that the January 18th, 2022 consent agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented or amended? All in favor? Perfect, that's passed. Okay. We'll move on to C, emergent changes to the agenda, and the recommendation is that the January 18th, 2022 regular board meeting agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as amended. If there's any emergent changes, can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Toon. Okay, and are there any amendments or, emergent changes to the agenda? Trustee Toon.
I would ask that action item be added. This is coming forward from Trustee Gimber and myself, and it's the recommendation that the Board of Trustees support admin in the return to spectators and school sports following the provincial guidelines where possible.
Okay. Were you able to get that?
I can send it to Nikki.
Okay. Yep.
Could Trustee Toon repeat that, please? I didn't hear it.
Thank you. We just maybe a little bit slower, Brad.
Okay.
I mean, Trustee Toon. I'm so sorry.
the recommendation that the Board of Trustees support admin in the return to spectators in school sports following the provincial guidelines where possible.
Okay. Is there, I guess there's no discussion around it. Is that, sorry, for clarity, do I just ask if everyone's in favor of that? As if there's any, or do I have to check if there's any other emergent motions first?
No, we do deal with one.
Do independently. Okay, so the emergent motion that's coming forward from Trustee Toon and Trustee Gimber in regards to the board supporting admin with spectators returning to sports would be added as an action item. All in favor of adding that to the agenda? Okay, and that is defeated. Okay, is there any other emergent changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, you didn't give me the opportunity to speak to why the rationale behind the emergent item.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I thought that we had no discussion around it. So
It's not discussion, but
just a rationale of
you
why
have to
it's
kinda
urgent?
give
Okay,
rationale
sorry about
on
that.
Why it would be emergent.
Okay. So do you want to speak to that now? I am,
I would appreciate
Terribly
that-
sorry.
that opportunity.
Yeah.
As many of you know, that we've gone to no spectators in sports, and that is something that it will be revisited at the end of this week, and this would allow for admin to have a correlated input from the Board of Trustees. When this decision was first made, it was done, our discussion happened in the Committee of the Whole, and that created some problems publicly with what was presented from the board, and a lot of people not knowing that this was something that was going to be revisited, or what the procedure was, or how and when the process was used to make the decision. So this would allow for that. I know personally I've had over 100 people reach out to me, and Carla, Trustee Gimber, has had a large number of emails and people reaching out as well. So I respectfully ask for your consideration to look at this and have this discussion here today in public.
thank you, Trustee Toon. I am sorry that I did not give you the opportunity to speak to why it was an emergent motion. Can we vote on this again then? Yeah? No one is going to be upset if we vote on it again? Okay, yeah, Trustee.
Point of order, I just have a clarity. So are we allowed to comment on it at all, or is this something that's not, I'm not sure. If the
Yeah,
process
thanks,
on
Trustee
it.
Hodges. So my understanding is that Trustee Toon would speak to it as to why it's urgent and why it needs to be now and not just added to a future board meeting. So Trustee Toon has spoken to the fact that they're receiving a lot of emails right now. This is something that's happening right at this moment, and that he wants to give our support to admin for when they will be making this at the end of the week, this conversation again, which is what makes it a timely issue. Is that correct, Trustee Toon?
Correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think that if you have any concerns or something, we could put it on the agenda, and all those could be expressed at that time.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that in mind, I will call the question again. And so Trustee Toon and Trustee Gimber are asking that the emergent item be brought as an action item in supporting MIN in returning spectators, or having spectators return to our sporting events when the time is appropriate. So all in favor of adding that discussion and action item to the agenda? Okay. All against? Okay, so that is defeated. Thank you very much, and I am sorry about the process. Is there any other emergent changes to the agenda? Trustee Toon?
Madam Chair, I would like my vote recorded on that item,
Okay.
please.
So we'll have all votes recorded.
No, you can only ask for your own vote after a vote is made. So if anyone would like their vote recorded, they
Sure.
need to request that at this
Yep.
time.
I'd like my vote recorded as well, please.
Okay. And trustee Stankiewicz would also like her vote recorded. Thank you. Is there any other emergent changes to come forward to the agenda? Thank you. Okay, so we will move to E, our action items. E1, bus license. In response to the notice of motion for December 14th, 2021 regular board meeting, Trustee Toon will discuss obtaining his bus license for volunteer purposes. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve Trustee Toon taking the MELT training offered through the Livingston Range School Division partnership with Palliser School Division for the purpose of volunteer bus driving. This is being moved by Trustee Toon, and I will go ahead and let him speak to it.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. I think that it's important to, for myself to get approval from the board for this item. I know I could just go and contact the division and get the numbers and do all this, but I think that the perception might be that I'm doing something that the board does not support. So I'd ask for your support in doing this. This would be at my own cost, just to drive bus where I'm available for sports teams and for students. So they're not for students at school, but for the sports teams, especially the ones my kids and families participating in. It's something that when I was a kid, my dad drove bus for us, and it was on a donation basis, and it really was nice to have the experience of having the parent be there and at the same time doing it to save some money for the sports teams with the high cost of busing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Trustee Toon. Is there any questions or comments around this? No? Okay, Trustee Gimber?
I fully support Trustee Toon in obtaining his school bus driver's license. I think that it's great to volunteer time to drive bus for sports teams and tournaments and such.
Thank you. Any other comments? Trustee Long?
Agreed. I think it's wonderful that Trustee Toon is coaching and is volunteering to drive the bus as well. Certainly supportive for our students and our sports programs.
Thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful to see parents getting involved, and trustees are still parents, and it's very appropriate. So the recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve Trustee Brad Toon taking the MELT training offered through the Livingston Range School Division partnership with Palliser School Division for the purpose of volunteer bus driving. All in favor? Perfect, that's passed. Okay. Moving on to E2, the board and CEO evaluation, facilitators, and dates. In 2020-2021, the Board of Trustees had Cal Hauserman and David George facilitate the CEO and board evaluation with a second mid-year meeting for goal setting and a final year-end checkup and coaching session. In order to provide the new board with direction and to help ensure that the great work that has been done continues on with the new board, facilitation of the board's CEO evaluation should start in May or June of 2022. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees engage Cal Hauserman and David George to facilitate the CEO board evaluation and goal setting for June 14th, 2022, or an alternate date selected by the board chair if the facilitators are unavailable on June 14th, 2022. Can I get someone to make this motion? Trustee Yagos? Okay, is there any conversation around this recommendation, this action item? Trustee Long?
Anytime we've had Cal and David facilitate any of our sessions, I've found them to be first-rate, just incredible gentlemen, and they do a really good job of helping us be better trustees and a better board. I totally support it.
We'll go Trustee Hodges and then Trustee Gimber.
Doing our board self-evaluation and our CEO evaluations is an important step in keeping this board accountable and keeping our superintendent accountable too. It's really important to have good facilitators to make sure that everything that is laid out is done properly and that the board and our CEO have a chance to be able to have the conversations and set goals for the future. So I appreciate Cal and David coming and working with the board. So I totally support this.
Thank you. Trustee Gimber?
Thank you. I also support Cal and David coming. They were fantastic for our professional development, and I think the consistency of having the same facilitators there is important.
I appreciate that input. Is there any other board members who would like to add? Okay, perfect. So then I'll call the question. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees engage Cal Hauserman and David George to facilitate the CEO board evaluation and goal setting for June 14th, 2022, or an alternate date selected by the board chair if the facilitators are unavailable on the 14th of 2022. So just before I call the question, I'm just reading the, okay, yeah, I was just making sure that this was just for one session in June. As the back information just shared that last year we had gotten them for both June and the mid-session, but at this time this motion is just for approving the facilitation of the CEO and board evaluations on June 14th or alternate date. Okay, so all in favor? Okay, that's passed. Thank you guys so much. I just wanted to double check that. Okay, so E3, Lrsd fact sheet on reserve. Mr. Perry?
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment before you end up having a motion for this, this item. I think at this point this is a factual document and is just giving you information about where the reserves sit and things of that nature. So I would say that it's more of a discussion item that I would go over with this board. If there was to be any action, then I think it would be something that would be discussed potentially by the audit committee, bring a recommendation back to the board of that nature. The board can determine what they want to do today, but that would be I would just go over as a discussion item, and if a recommendation of something different as far as how you would want to use reserves or that type of thing, that would come forward at another time from a recommendation of the audit committee. That would just be my suggestion.
Thank you, Trustee Perry. I mean,
I've been promoted.
I know. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Perry. So I'll just read I'll read here that the Lrsd fact sheet on reserve is the document that summarizes the financial reserves held by Livingston Range School Division and identifies where they have been designated. Lrsd reserves are reviewed on an annual basis after the completion of the audited financial statements. Associate Superintendent Business Services Jeff Perry will speak to the Lrsd fact sheet on reserves. As Mr. Perry has stated, our audit committee is the group that goes in depth and looks at this in another meeting. So would the trustees be in favor of moving this E3 item into the discussion item as F5 and having it as a discussion item only today? All in favor? There was no motion, but feels official. Okay, he's moving it. Okay, so we will go ahead. Does that need to be an official motion? Okay, yeah.
I mean, I can speak to it now if you want me to speak to it, and so it's in the order that it is on the agenda, but you're just changing it to a discussion item and not actually having a motion, so nobody's put forward a motion at this point.
So I'm just going to, as board chair, bump that over to the discussion with the support of the board and no official motion. So I am going to move you to F5 though.
Certainly. Give me more time to prepare.
That's all right. Okay. Warm up those vocals. Thank you, Mr. Perry. So we'll move on to E4, board meeting date change Trustee Hodges will discuss with the board regarding moving the March 15th, 2022 regular board meeting. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve changing the March 15th, 2022 regular meeting to March 22nd of 2022. That is being moved by Trustee Hodges, and I will give it to her to speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. We had an opportunity for PD to come up on exactly the same date as our board meeting that all of the board members wanted to attend. And so we felt it necessary to move our board meeting date to March 15th, from March 15th to this 22nd, sorry. And so I'm just seeking approval for the change of date.
Thank you, Trustee Hodges. Is there any discussion or comments around this from other trustees at this time? No? Okay, I just want to say the CAS FNMI PD that is happening that day has in the past, and I believe will continue to be very impactful. And it's so important that we represent all students in our division and all perspectives, and it's just such a wonderful learning opportunity that I feel moving an entire board meeting for one piece of trustee may seem extreme in some cases, but the benefit that this will be to our board is just so worth it. So I definitely am in support of this. Did you want to speak to it in closing, Trustee Hodges?
Nope, thank you. You summed it up very well. Thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve changing the March 15th, 2022 regular board meeting to March 22nd of 2022. All in favor? That's passed. Okay. Our E5 is regular board meeting live streaming. This is being moved by Trustee Toon. Trustee Brad Toon will discuss the option of live streaming the regular board meetings, and the recommendation will be that the Board of Trustees approve that the regular board meetings will be live streamed starting February of 2022. Trustee Toon, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is something that has come up, and I know not only to myself, but other trustees have heard from stakeholders that there's a desire to live stream with everything that's going on and not being able to travel as much and attend meetings in person. Not that we get a lot of people attending in person, that they would like on certain issues that are really pertinent to view the meeting live and in person. And I know that's something that the town of Fort Macleod does here in this room, so we have the capabilities to do that, and it was always something we were planning on working towards. So I think now with everything that's going on, it's time for us to move forward with that to help continue the transparency that we know is important.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. I'll open it up to other trustees for questions, conversation, discussion. Go ahead, Trustee Long.
I agree with Trustee Toon. I think it's an excellent idea, and as Trustee Toon said, as long as we have the proper equipment and the ability to do this, and that it's not putting extra burden on our executive secretary, and that our associate superintendent has the technical ability to handle this, I think it's an excellent idea.
Thank you, Trustee Long. I'll go to Trustee Yagos, and then we'll come to you, Trustee Hodges.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. First of all, will this also be put onto our website actually as recorded, so that if somebody wants to go and listen to it above and beyond it? And is this going to be on YouTube, and how long will it stay on YouTube as a live streamed one? Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Yagos. All of those things, so yep.
Yeah, I don't know who can answer that.
Okay, yeah, I can answer it for you. Or Mr. Kuzak can, but I'll let you speak to it.
Some of those questions to be determined about the length, but it will be recorded, and I would suggest YouTube is the place to keep that, and then we'll determine the length that it stays on YouTube.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzak. So all of those things can be determined at a later date. YouTube does seem to be the best option, as Mr. Kuzik has said, and then a link would still be on our website. So the place where people regularly go to see it, they will still go to that same place. It's my understanding. Trustee Hodges?
Trustee, I guess, asked my question. I just wanted to make sure that there was still going to be a recording so that if anybody missed the live stream, they could still go back and look at it. So that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Stankiewicz?
It's important. I support this.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from any of the trustees at this time? Trustee Gimber?
I'm the last one. I might as well put my 2 cents in. I also support live streaming. It's been brought up to me a few times from different people that they'd like to see it. We have the technological ability to do so, so I don't see any reason why not. So I do support it.
Thank you so much. Okay, I will let Trustee Toon closing remarks if you have any at this time.
Thank you. Appreciate the support on this. When I brought up the idea of recording meetings a few years ago, there was some concern, and I know nerves from people that you're going to be out there for posterity, but I think it's worked really well to have it, and it really helps with the engagement level, because having meetings during the day makes it difficult for people to attend, especially with wintertime days like this. It's nice to be able to sit in your pajamas and join into the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. So the recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve that the regular board meetings will be live streamed starting February of 2022. All in favor? Thank you very much. That's passed. Okay. Social media access protocols. This is being moved by Trustee Gimber. As you are aware, a timed Facebook post was sent out at the beginning of January welcoming students back for the winter break on January 3rd. Simultaneously, the Minister of Education delayed the return to classes on January 10th, 2022. And therefore, the notice posted on Facebook was incorrect and remained in place longer than it should have. Although the intention of the original post was in good faith, this unfortunate incident has highlighted the need for review of the social media access protocols. The current Lrsd social media access accounts have 3 users with access, all of whom are administrative staff at the Lrsd. Given the Board of Trustees are in a role of governance and should be in a position to mitigate a recurrence of a similar situation, Trustee Gimber will discuss granted access to the social media accounts. Sorry about that. Okay, so the actual recommendation will be that the chairperson be granted access to the social media account in reference to Administrative Procedure 142. That's being moved by Trustee Gimber, and I will turn it to her to speak to at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the preamble pretty much explains all of it. I don't think that the meaning behind this is for the chairperson to actively post. It's more of a last person standing kind of a thing. If there is something that needs to be taken down, just like this example, there's another person that has access that isn't part of the administrative staff, and the chairperson would be the most logical person for that to be on the Board of Trustees.
Thank you so much, Trustee Gimber. I'll open it up to questions and comments from trustees. We'll go ahead with Trustee Long first, and then to Trustee Toon.
Yeah, I question this recommendation, and the reason I do is because I don't think this is a governance situation, that I think this is administrative, and that if there was a problem with it, this Facebook posting not coming down quickly enough, I would rather see all our administration have access to it. If at this point you might understand that only 2 people have access?
Depends. It's mostly Division 1s or 3. We have one of our techs that has access to all of them, and then those that post, and then a backup of those. So in theory, we have 3.
So it would be possible to have 4. And then there's the less likelihood that this would happen. If there were 4 people at access, one of them is more than likely going to be aware that this has happened. It's less likely to get missed. And again, I'll reiterate that I think this is a administrative action and not a governance, and we're a school board and we're about governance, not about administration.
Thank you so much, Trustee Long. We'll go to Trustee Toon.
Thank you. I agree with Trustee Long that the rationale given before the recommendation kind of lends itself more to administration, but not governance. But I would argue that I agree with the recommendation because that's what we're here to debate. I think that in today's digital world, it doesn't make sense for the chairperson or spokesperson to be able to stand up in front of global news and make a statement in any time, whether it's an emergency situation or not, but not be able to post that same message without it being filtered through administration. If in case of an emergency, I would like to see the chairperson, our voice for the school board, have that same access to, because we'd access a lot more parents and community members through social media. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. We'll go to Trustee Hodges.
I agree with what my 2 fellow trustees had said too. I worry a little bit about what Trustee Toon said about even though we have a really good chairperson right now that wouldn't maybe take advantage of this, I do worry about a chair taking rogue and posting whatever they want, and they don't have any filters to go through. They can just post it. So I think that if this is something that is the board wants, I think there has to be a few strict guidelines around it, because I do feel that could potentially pose a problem.
Thank you, Trustee Hodges. Trustee Yagos.
I agree with Trustee Hodges. I feel this is an administrative decision, and other than this, which wasn't really, I mean, I know it was inconvenient, and the public needed to know it, but if they were listening to the news or anything else, they would have realized this, that the schools were going to be closed until January 10th. I think we have to, whatever the chair publishes or says has to be agreed to by the board, and that does, and really it goes for anything, even when she speaks for the board in negotiations, is what the board has decided. So I feel that, like Trustee Hodges said, that this might in the future raise some concerns. So.
Thank you, Trustee Yagos. I wonder if Trustee Gimber would consider it a friendly amendment if it was changed to that the chairperson be granted access to the social media accounts for the purpose of removing or posting approved posts in emergent situations. Would you consider that a friendly amendment, or do you believe it changes the intent? And maybe
No,
it just
that would be a friendly amendment.
that you would consider that friendly amendment.
Yep.
So I'll read that again to you, Nikki. So it would be after social media accounts, comma, for the purpose of removing or posting approved posts in emergent situations. Yep. Approved posts in emergent situations. In reference to administrative procedure. Okay, so just for clarity, because that was considered a friendly amendment, we are still speaking to the entire recommendation. I believe Trustee Long had his hand up next. Nope, you go, yeah, and then, yeah.
So a question about this, then who would be giving the approval? Administration would give you approval?
So in my mind, an approved post would be like the post that was posted. It was already set to come out. It was like on a timer, right? Like so it's already been approved, it's already going out. Anything that our social media team posts, or our, Carly is the one who is in charge of it, posts, those are all approved. If I, as the chairperson, was going to post something, then it would have to be a message that had already been approved by the board, or something that we had already sent out as a social or as a media post.
Okay, then I understand that. Then, but this situation was, if I understand it correctly, that there was a post that came up, and because of the timing of the post, it was missed and well, not removed as soon as it should have been. How does that help that problem?
So the situation that occurred was really just a perfect storm. It was a media post that was to welcome students back, coming back to in-person learning. We're excited, and those 3 people all happened to be, you know, on the Christmas break. For a few hours, we were unable to reach any of them at that time. So, I mean, I am currently chair, and I was home. I could have taken it down, but that is not to say that in the future another chair may not have also been on the slopes at the time, or wherever they may be. So
yeah, so I'm going to back up a little bit. Trustee Yeagus and Trustee Hodges mentioned that, and it is something that we always have to keep in mind, that we are not making policies just for this board at this time. Our policies have to be functional and positive in the future. And then I'll go back to where I was. I still don't see how your friendly amendment would have prevented this situation. I'm in agreement with the chairperson being able to put up approved things or remove approved sites, but I don't see how that helps alleviate what happened. And isn't that why Trustee Gimber brought this up in the first place, was for a safety protocol?
thank you, Trustee Long. Trustee Toon, we'll go to you next.
Thanks. Yeah, it's hard when you're looking at this, you got to look broader, like Trustee Long said, that this is will be a long-serving motion and put into policy. My intent would be to pass this motion and then bring forward a motion arising that policy committee develop guidelines to put into policy around this, to clarify some of the questions that have come up on how and when and what is approved and what isn't. That way we have something solid for the chair to look at when doing that. I struggle with the approved portion of that, because our chair doesn't have to share approved messages. Our chair can share any messages on behalf of the board at any time. That is the right of the chair to be our spokesperson. We've had the chair in the past speak to media. They don't even have to inform the board that it happens even after, because that's their role, is to speak on our behalf. So we want to be transparent and share everything with everybody, but at the same time, we can't hinder the process and say the chair has to email us all and get approval on sending a message out. That there's emergency situations that just don't justify that.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. We'll go to Trustee Hodges and then Trustee Yeagos.
Thank you. I do agree, like, directing policy maybe to come up with direct policy and how this is going to operate or whatever. I agree with what Trustee Toon said. I feel that if we are going to do that, it needs to be added into the motion of directing policy to come back with recommendations around the procedure. So just let Trustee Yeagus speak to this now.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Trustee Yeagus.
Yeah, I agree with Trustee Hodges. I was just going to ask, I think as making policy, we need guidelines, because I don't want to sit there and try to think up, as a policy committee, it's hard to think of some of the guidelines. I'd like to know what the board feels the guidelines should be in making these policies. It's pretty vague in here, and what is approved, what isn't. There has to be some guidelines so the policy committee can make the decisions in terms of what they could put in here. And I do know the final decision does lie with the board, but still, I think we need a little bit more guidance in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Yagos. We'll go to Trustee Long.
Yeah, I support in general what Trustee Gimber has brought up here. I wonder if Trustee Gimber would be willing to table this and let us have some time to develop some ideas for the policy, because Trustee Toon also has a good idea about putting it in place and then developing the policy, but we need to spend some time on it. So if Trustee Gimber would be ready to table this, I don't think it's that we're all against it. It's we need to have some time to share so we can bring it back.
Thank you,
and
Trustee.
do it correctly.
Thank you, Trustee Long. I guess I'll let Trustee Gimber speak to that, or Trustee Toon, did you want to? Okay, we'll let Trustee Gimber speak to it first.
Yeah, I would be willing to table the motion or the recommendation to the next meeting, please.
So I just for clarity, just for clarity, if we table this motion, are you asking policy to meet and discuss what it could potentially look like? Because policy doesn't meet and, we'll go to Trustee Gimber and then Trustee.
I was thinking it would be more in-camera meeting of the whole, that kind of a thing, to have the conversation and then bring it back. But
Okay, so Trustee Toon had his hand up just before we had this clarity, and then we'll come to Trustee Hodges.
Thanks. I struggle with tabling it to do all the work outside of the meeting and then just come and bring it back for approval. If that's the intent, we could amend the motion to direct the policy committee to develop a policy to give the chairperson access to social media for the purpose of adding and removing posts in reference to admin procedure 142. And it was mentioned, what are the guidelines that policy would be looking at? Well, I think we have it in the motion there. You start with admin procedure 142, you look at the role of the chair, and you kind of develop what you think that would be and bring back for board approval. That way we have a concise motion that allows the work to be done, and it's not being done by one person who has to try and encapsulate all this great discussion that happened.
Okay, thank you. Just before we go to the other trustees, we've got Mr. Perry with a point of order or process, perhaps.
I mean, you have a motion on the floor, right? And you need to address the motion. Table typically means to another point in the meeting. Postponement means to another meeting. You can withdraw the motion and put forward a motion such as what Mr. Toon suggested would likely be the most appropriate manner if that's the direction you want to go.
And how long if we just put a pin in it? Just kidding. Okay, we'll go to Trustee Hodges.
I agree with Trustee Toon. I think that if we want to direct policy, we need to have a motion on the floor so that policy knows exactly what direction we're headed. So I would like to see it stay on there.
Point of order. We have a motion on the floor to table it. We cannot discuss the motion right now. We have to deal with the motion to table.
Thank you. I don't believe there was a motion made to table. She just agreed that she would feel comfortable tabling it if that was so. But thank you. There was no motion to table it. So thank you, Trustee Hodges. Did you have something else you wanted to add, Trustee Yagos, in regards to this motion at the time?
No, I was just going to, I understood she made a motion to table, but if she, did you make a motion to table? Okay. If it wasn't a motion, that's fine.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll let Trustee Gimber talk.
okay, so may I please amend the motion, the recommendation, to read something like Trustee Toon said, that the chairperson be granted access to the social media accounts. No. Okay. That we direct policy. May I ask for trustee
Yeah,
Hodges' assistance in this motion, please?
go ahead, Trustee Hodges.
Thank you. I just think that the motion that's there is good, and that we just need to add, to direct policy to bring back a policy with the guidelines as to how this is going to work. So I just think that that's the only thing we need to do, is just add to direct policy to bring back. And if you guys want a specific time, next board meeting, whatever, we could do that too. Just whenever they can get it
Okay,
done.
thank you, Trustee Hodges. So we're just going to take 1 second here. I will read the friendly amended and again friendly amended motion. So it says that the chairperson be granted access to social media accounts for the purpose of adding or removing approved posts in emergent situations in reference to Administrative Procedure 142. They will direct the policy committee to, oh yeah, so it would say the board also directs policy, or directs the policy committee to, yeah, bring back recommended guidelines. Are you comfortable with that wording, Trustee Kimber?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that is the motion on the floor now. Is there any further discussion or questions at this time? Trustee Yagos?
It just says guidelines. I'm just looking and I wanted, it says the following, to a following board meeting. Do we want it for the February board meeting? Or it would be nice to have a specific time of, unless we want to keep discussing this. So, I mean, what I'm asking is that when, because it, rather than a board meeting, the next board meeting or what?
Are you proposing a friendly amendment?
No, I don't, was that what the intent of that, the rest was when she said to a following board meeting, or was the intent for the February board meeting?
Trustee Kimber?
I wasn't going to put any pressure on the policy committee to force it to come back for the February board meeting. If you'd like me to put pressure on you, I'm comfortable with a following board meeting is fine.
Okay, Trustee Long?
Trustee Kimber, I'm going to assume this is not a pressing issue, so perhaps you might add to your recommendation for the 5th time, or whatever it is, that we bring it to the policy committee bring it to the March 22nd board meeting.
Are you proposing a friendly amendment?
No, I'm proposing a Trustee Gimber make another amendment.
Yes, I will just finish wordsmithing this to say the March 22nd board meeting, please. And thank you all for your patience in me creating my very first recommendation and motion.
Thank you so much for that clarity. Trustee Yagos?
Thank you. I feel as a chair of the policy committee, we need guidelines in terms of a timeline. Because when you say a board meeting, I mean, we could wait till next September, and I don't think we want to wait that long. But anyhow, thank you. I appreciate having a timeline.
Thank you very much. Just a question around, perhaps Mr. Kuzik could answer this, around security. I know that there's only 3 people who have access to this, and there's reasons around that. Do you feel comfortable talking to the security reasons?
Yeah, the reason we have less, not more, is if those accounts get hacked, is the word I'll use, get taken over, then we lose control of those accounts. So I think in your process, you should definitely have that conversation on how to keep your password and things like that safe, and 2-factor authentication, and understanding, what needs to be done as far as using those platforms as well.
Thank you so much. Trustee Long?
Who chairs our policy committee? Then Trustee Yegus, is it possible to have Superintendent Cusack at your meeting in contact with you when you make this policy?
Yep, policy
It's
always.
we could have whoever we want to have on our policy committee, I gather. But yes, it'll be possible we could have input from other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so all those details can be figured out at the time. So if there's no further questions or comments, I will have Trustee Gimber, if you have any closing remarks, and then I'll read the final motion and we can vote on it.
My only closing remark is, again, to thank you for your patience in creating this.
Thank you so much. So we're going to call the question. This was moved by Trustee Gimber, and it is the recommendation that the chairperson be granted access to the social media accounts for the purpose of adding or removing approved posts in emergent situations in reference to Administrative Procedure 142. The board also directs the policy committee to bring back recommended guidelines to the March 22, 2022 board meeting. All of those in favor? Okay. That's passed. Thank you, and I appreciate the process. I know it sometimes seems like a lot, but to make sure that we get it right, we need input from everyone, so I appreciate that. We'll move on to E7, Board Policy. The Policy Review Committee Chair, Clara Yagos, will provide an update regarding Board Policy 9, Committees of the Board. And the recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve the following changes made to Board Policy 9, Committees of the Board. 1, add, if a trustee is unable to fulfill their committee commitments, they should reach out to the board chair, who will help address the situation. If a change is needed, it will come to a board meeting. To the preamble. This is being moved by Trustee Yagos, and I will let her speak to it now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have could you please bring up, is it there? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Okay, Eva, this is what we're going to add on to the preamble. If a trustee is unable to fulfill their committee commitment, they should reach out to the board chair, who will help address the situation. And board chair should be in italics. I'm sorry, I'll just say some housekeeping items too. If a change is needed, it will come to a board meeting. And that means at any time that if somebody on the board, like if you make a decision to go on a committee and you just find out that you just cannot make your commitment to that committee or want to change it, well, for whatever reason, you'll go to the board chair, ask for a change before the next organizational meeting, and the board chair will make a decision then if your reason is a good enough reason for this to happen. And I guess what I'm going to ask for at this point because there's some other things we want to change, but this is right in policy. Is there any problems with this or questions or what else? Trustee Toon?
Thank you. I really think that this clause in here isn't necessary. To leave it to the board chair to decide if a change needs to happen, that's becomes more opinion based and not really defined in the role of the chair. Up until now, if something needed to happen, we had just addressed it. It was brought to a committee of the whole. We had a discussion, and then it would be brought into a public board meeting. I really don't think that we can't facilitate this whole process without this wording in here, and I think it leaves it too ambiguous on what criteria the chair is using to justify that making the change or not. That really isn't something that I'm comfortable with. I think it needs to be the complete wisdom of the board. We had this happen recently where person asked for a change, and we talked about it in a committee hall, and there was decided not to make the change. And I think that we can continue on with that process. I'm not comfortable with the wording.
So, is there any other comments on this?
I think we decided to do the board chair, just because sometimes it was just, maybe it wasn't, they weren't sure if they wanted to continue on, or they just were having struggles with it, and we felt like the board chair could possibly just help them with maybe some of the issues, instead of it coming straight to a board right away. I'm comfortable with it coming to a committee of the whole if that's something that the board would like to see, but we felt that there was a necessary clause in here for trustees who felt they weren't able to fulfill their committee, because it goes to the detriment of the committee if they're unable to fulfill it, that there needed to be a way for them to see that they could change how they wanted, or if they wanted off the committee. So we were wordsmithing, and so we were trying to come up with the best possible scenario for a trustee to make a change. And so that's why we just left it as a board chair who facilitates a lot of the issues that happen at the board already. And so not necessarily did everything have to come to the committee of the whole. So that's why we left it as the board chair, but I'm open to hear more thoughts on that too.
Trustee Long?
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Hodges. I understand that. I'll throw a couple kinks into it here. One is I'm not sure about the wording if a change is needed. I'd be more comfortable with changes considered. And I do like the idea that if a trustee, for whatever reason, is thinking they cannot fulfill their commitment or they need to leave a committee, I like the idea that they would contact the board chair first to make she or he aware of it before it came to the board itself. I think it's justifiable, it's fair that the chair would know beforehand, even if it's the evening before the meeting. And I don't know if you want to say a change is needed. That's a pretty definite word. A change is considered.
Thank you, Trustee Long. Trustee Yagos?
If there is no problems, we could change the word considered, because, as I said, we were trying to think of ways that we could put this. I do know that there are situations after we make a decision on who's in committees. There are situations when we would like to change a committee for whatever reason. And maybe it's some person after might decide that they're on too many committees, and somebody, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that you might want to change the committees, and there has been some. So I think we need something in policy. So considered would be one, if that's, and maybe we should say it will come to the board, or not a board meeting, and then that means it could be either committee of the whole or a board meeting per se. It'll have to be passed by at the board to change it to the committee, but they could discuss it at a board, at a committee of the whole. If you just say it will come to the board.
Thank you.
That's
Trustee.
my suggestion. Anybody else? I would like to get other. Oh.
Thank you. I'm struggling a little bit with this one, actually, to be honest. At the organizational meeting, I thought that, at an organizational meeting, I believe there should be the information available to tell you what the commitment is going to be, and if you commit to that committee, then you are responsible until the next organizational meeting, as far as I'm concerned. Because there's people that could be on the other side of it who have now found themselves with additional time and could be on more committees and have to wait until the organizational meeting for that to happen. So I'm not comfortable with this at all.
Thank you, Trustee Gimber. Trustee Long?
There are there are obviously factors that come into this. And the first one that comes to me is medical. Family commitments. I couldn't think of them all here, but there would be lots of justifiable reasons why a trustee might not be able to fulfill their commitment.
Thanks, Trustee Hodges.
There's definitely going to be a conversation first before a person is allowed to step off a committee. It's not going to just be because they don't feel like it. But I'm not willing to put the work of a committee jeopardize the work of a committee just because somebody can't fulfill it. This is going to come to the board. The trustee will be, if the trustee decides to step off of the committee, it does give the other board members to then step in onto that committee. And so if another board member feels like they would like to step into that committee, that gives them the opportunity at that time. I feel like this is not something that'll happen very often, but I do feel that this is an important step in our policy to allow trustees, if there is a legitimate reason why they cannot fulfill their committee commitment. Yes, at the organizational meeting, when you step onto committees, you do realize the time commitment and stuff like that, but sometimes the time commitment is more than you think it's going to be, or again, like Trustee Long said, medical, for whatever reason. That's why I feel that it's appropriate for the trustee to reach out to the board chair and have a conversation first, and then it will be considered, then it'll be brought forward to the board to discuss it as a whole.
Thanks, Trustee Hodges. We'll go to Trustee Toon.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree there are cases that warrant change. I just don't want it to be too ambiguous, so it just somebody gets on something and just decides they don't like it and then wants it to change. Just some wordsmithing that I'd propose. If a trustee is unable to fulfill their commitment, they can reach out to the board chair. That way you're not stuck saying you show up to a committee of the whole, you have a health reason or other rationale, and it's no, you got to go back to square one and talk to the board chair about this first, which really we don't want to hamper the situation and make it worse. And then I would ask that the period be moved to after the chair, that we strike out who will help address the situation. Maybe the chair won't help address the situation. They will just be informed and then inform the board that the request has been made. Really, I don't want to make this harder than it is and keep it simple so we can continue on the good work.
Okay, so Trustee Toon, sorry, are you finished? I'm sorry. If I understand you correctly, what you would like to say, they can reach out to the board chair, period. Okay. And if a change is considered, it will come to the board.
Yeah, the second sentence would all remain the same.
Okay, and board, once again, should be capitalized. Okay, there's a Trustee Long. Go.
Trustee Long.
Yeah, I like it. It's excellent. That's really good wording, Trustee Toon.
Okay. So from my understanding, one of the main reasons this we wanted to add this in from our discussion before was we just wanted to make sure that it's clear that if I'm on a committee and I can't fulfill it anymore, I don't just reach out to Greg and say, hey, Greg, I can't be on this committee. Are you interested in taking it over? And he's like, yeah, I'd love to. And then we let the board know, hey, I can't be on this committee and whatever, but Greg said he'd take it over for me. I think that first part is, we're kind of getting caught up in it, but I think the most important part is if someone cannot fulfill their commitment on a committee and a change is needed or considered, it needs to come to a board meeting so that others have the equal opportunity to sit on that committee. You can't just hand off or trade or, and so I really feel like that's the main idea that needs to be conveyed from my understanding and my opinion as a trustee. So I just wanted to put that out there, and maybe we can all just read it again and see if that's the message we're getting. And if I'm wrong and there's a different message that we're trying to get across, then that's fine too. So just before we have any more conversation, I am just going to read what it says now, that the change is, if a trustee is unable to fulfill their committee commitments, they can reach out to the board chair. If a change is considered, it will come to a board meeting. Oh, it will come to the board. Okay. So my question is, if a trustee is unable to fulfill their commitment, that second sentence right there, they can reach out to the board chair. If it's optional, does that need to be in here? They can reach out to the board chair. They don't have to. They can just bring it to a meeting of the whole. Like, do we need to have those words in there then? If it's an option anyways, could it just say, if a trustee is unable to fulfill their committee commitments and a change is considered or needs to be considered, it will come to the board. Those are my thoughts. Does anyone else? Trustee Long? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so, yeah, to react to what you've just said, then, do you think that the word can replacing the word should changes the intent of the recommendation?
I absolutely think it does, because it takes it from you, that's a step you must take to reach out to the board, to that's a step that you can take if you want to. It doesn't change the intent, but it changes the process.
All right, then, how about this wording? They will reach out, and I know that is the same intent as should. It's not really a synonym. I don't know if that helps everybody in their decision-making. They will reach out to the board chair. I'm just throwing out ideas that we get to a consensus.
Thank you. We'll go to Trustee Hodges.
So just correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Poitras, but I thought that the last part of what your comment was to say that if a trustee is unable to fill their commitment and a change is considered, it'll come to the board. And so not even having the chair in there. So I think that if a trustee is unable to fill their commitment and a change is considered, it will come to the board. Just like that. Trustee Toon.
Thank you. We'll go to Trustee Toon.
I support the last wording. It's more concise. We can always inform the board chair of actions that are about to happen. It doesn't preclude you from doing that, but it also, we have to take it to the board. It's their decision to make, and I agree with our chair saying that this can't be horse trading that happens or negotiations that happen beforehand before you come to the meeting, that you already have a plan in place to anoint your successor. That's not how we do it.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll go to Trustee
I'd
Eagles.
like to hear what Jocelyn has to say about this, because she was the only one who hasn't really commented on it, and she's on part of our committee too, so.
So Trustee Stankiewicz, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share at this time?
I like it to be concise. I support the last wording. I don't want to tie us to unnecessary things that are not required. And I think this is good. Let's go. Move on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Trustee Eagles?
Okay, so are we agreed on and I want to thank everybody, because this was a hard one to think of the proper wording and everything for it and how we're going to put it in. But I think it's really necessary to have this somewhere in there, because there are times when this has or can happen. Not often, because usually when a person gets a committee, they become very possessive of it. But I do know that there are times when when, you know, it just circumstances just make it so that, you know, you just can't continue on with this. So I hope everybody is happy with these changes. I guess we should maybe vote. I don't think there was anything else on this first part that we had a change on. Not that I have, was there? No. Okay, but there is something else, so maybe we should vote on just this change with this part of the, because we did add, or are going to add an appendix to this, to this policy, Appendix A. And this appendix is going to be the meeting process for electing, electing the chair, vice chair, and committee members. And this is going to be an appendix that's to the policy, which means that it can be changed, you know, it doesn't, it's just suggestions on it. I am going to, I guess we should vote maybe on this first part on the policy itself, and then I'll talk about what is going to be on the appendix and just see if everybody agrees on it. I don't have the full one written out yet. There is just well, let's vote on this first. So.
Okay, thanks, Trustee Diego. So the recommendation now is that the Board of Trustees approve the following change made to Board Policy 9, Committees of the Board, stating, if a trustee is unable to fulfill their committee commitment and a change is considered, it will come to the board. That's being moved by Trustee Diegos. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you so much. Trustee?
Can I go on and talk about the Appendix A? I'd like to just get
Sure.
Opinions on that, to bring it up to the board, and then we'll have to approve the final one at the next board meeting.
Okay, so you just want to discuss
I
it?
just want to throw some ideas out there and have a discussion on that, unless there's a problem with that.
Can we do that at our next meeting of the whole? It's not on our agenda for today, and it would be more of an
Well, this is part of this policy too.
Okay, sure. Let's go over that. Do you have it
I
for
have
Nikki to bring up?
the basics
Okay.
meeting thing. One of the things we have found up to this point is that we have some problems with the process that we use for electing the chair. I'm sorry, for getting the committees. And it just seems like every time we do it, and I'm talking primarily at the organizational meeting. So I think we need to have something that is clear and outlined so that we can follow. Not that it's going to be perfect, because we're probably going to find problems with it. Maybe not at in the middle of the term, but I know there might be one at an organizational meeting. And so some of the ideas that we came up with is that a meeting of the whole will be held up to 1 week before the organizational meeting, and this will be, well, we could probably have it, no, we don't have to say that. And maybe on election years on that date, and there's just some ideas I threw out, we might have an informal breakfast with if there are new board members, so that the new board members will feel a little more not only welcome, but they'll get to know the board, the rest of the members, and each other more before we just jump into an organizational meeting. At that meeting, we'll talk about who wants to run for chair and vice chair, and have a discussion around all the committees. Okay? On election years, the organizational meeting will start at 9. First of all, we'll have election of the chair and vice chair, go into camera, and then determine the committees, and then come out and then talk about, who's on what committee after that. Those are some of the ideas that we came up with in terms of just trying to make this process a little easier, because I do know for the 2 new board members this time, it was a little bit confusing for them about what to do. And if we try to do it all in one day, there's a lot of information that comes out there. Comments? Well, I'm not asking anybody to vote on this because we haven't got it all written out.
Thank you, Trustee Yagos. I think what we need to do is, I think we need to have something brought forward, just like we did here. If the policy committee can just bring it to the board so that we can actually look at and see what it looks like and then discuss the changes at that time, I think that would be most appropriate.
Okay, I just thought we'd bring up the fact that we are going to bring those changes forward.
Okay.
And we'll get something written up for the next meeting of the whole and then for the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So with that, we are going to take, that brings us to the end of our action items. We'll take a 10-minute health break and come back at 11 o'clock for our discussion information items. Thank you. Nikki, are we ready when you're ready? Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry that break was a little bit longer. I just had a few things on the agenda I needed to sort myself out. So we're going to move on to our discussion and information items. We are a little bit behind schedule, so we're going to move F3, our inclusive education presentation with Lisa Furukawa, up because we were going to have her at 11:05, and that happens to be the time now. So if Mr. Cusack is comfortable with that.
Yeah, well,
okay with that?
I can be super quick.
Okay.
Trustee
What
Burgess.
about, you don't know about all the questions and the,
No, I can. I'm ready to go, and I can be super quick. I
Okay.
promise.
okay, are you okay with that? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so we'll go ahead with Mr. Cusack because he just wants to.
And
first.
it's good to have Lisa here. She collaborated with this. So
Okay, so just before you go, I'm just going to read it here that we're going to do F1 Learning Disruption Funding Update. Mr. Chad Cusack, Associate Superintendent, Curriculum and Innovation, will update the Board of Trustees regarding the learning disruption funding. So we'll get you to go ahead with that.
So thank you for that. And as you can see, and Lisa was a big part of this as well as we developed the plan going forward. And you might have remembered in the summer, we had a summer reading program that we established because we started to see of our Division 1 students that we wanted to focus on literacy and numeracy to help them as best we possibly can. So based on that, there's our mission, vision, and core values that we leveraged to be able to develop a plan to be able to go forward with potential funding that may come. So as you'll see the next slide, Alberta Education identified 30% of the students in grades 1 to 3 may need additional supports following the COVID-19 disruptions. We were seeing not necessarily that number, but we were seeing a need to continue that, like I mentioned, with the summer reading program we did last year. So based on that, as you saw the announcement, Alberta Ed promised to send some funding to be able to address the situation. So next slide. So the funding was targeted for literacy and numeracy instruction specifically for grades 1, 2, and 3, starting with grades 2 and 3 and then folding into grades 1. So through Dr. Giorgio and Dr. Perlia, we talked about screening tools potentially there to identify students that may need supports based on what's happened with COVID-19 and the disruptions. So next slide. And so basically what happened, they developed a number of assessment tools that we would use in September with the grades 2s and 3s initially to identify those students that may need support. As to calculate that data and send it up to Alberta Education, and they provided us with funding based on those assessment needs. So we used the CC3, the Castle and Coulthart assessment, and the letter name sound assessment, the LENS. We use those both for grades 2 and 3 for literacy to identify foundational skills that they may require. We also use the MIPI because we've used that traditionally. It's not my favorite screener for this purpose, but it was all we had at that particular time and something that all our students do anyways as far as a screener in the fall. So we decided to use that. For the grade 1s, we'll use the Alberta Numeracy screener to be able to identify students that are in need. So the target were those highly predictive future outcome skills that basically that the foundational skills of reading and numeracy, literacy and numeracy. So we identified that was the focus of that. And for the purpose of this intervention, because I want to remind everyone, intervention goes on often in our schools. It continues every day. But this was additional support. So we wanted the province wanted a 12 to 16 week focused instruction for those students that need that. So they provided supports, and with those supports, we used to hire staff to be able to accommodate that. It's very contextual at each school and how their learning support works through, but also their classroom structure and the students and mixed grades, and it's very contextual. So it was quite the navigation that Lisa and I did to be able to work with their staffs to find something that worked right for every school. And the next slide. So basically in September, the grades in 2s and 3s did an assessment, and we identified the number of students that were there. The grade 1s, we'll do that in February 7th and be able to do that both literacy and numeracy for those two. And we'll use the lens for the grade 1s, and we'll use the Alberta numeracy screener for the grade 1s as well. So they're actually doing that right now, and I'll submit that in a couple weeks. So basically, staff was put in place to work with students on target financial skills and literacy numeracy. So some ads have gone out. You may have seen some new teachers in the buildings. And these are teachers that will be working with the staff. That's another important piece with this. So through that process, we identified people that will be able to support this. They've been hired for 12 to 16 weeks. Some schools have tried to find some more money to extend that. The grade 1s, the same thing will happen with the grade 1s, probably in semester 2. We also, through the literacy and numeracy funding that I do have, I brought in Dr. Deborah Cara and Kathy Charchin to give specific professional development for those people that will be delivering those interventions. Not to say that everyone's going to do exactly the same thing. Again, it's contextual into what work's already been done in the building, some of the structures that are in place, but they give that foundational knowledge of the important pieces of literacy and the important pieces of numeracy. So we did that and gave them some examples and some resources to be able to deliver some forms of interventions with the students. Again, Lisa will be happy to say we really pushed the push-in model, the inclusion model, not to pull-out model. So this would be happening most likely in the schools, in small groups, or in the classrooms in small groups intervention strategies. So that'll be that's going on right now, and they're doing that, working hard at that. There's a pre-assessment I spoke about, but there'll be a post-assessment at the end of 12 weeks or 16 weeks, somewhere in that framework. And it'll be the same one they did before, and to see if there was any gains that were accomplished through this. And then we'll take that data and continue to work with those students, with their classroom teachers, and moving forward to make sure we get some success. So if you click the next slide there, you'll see that basically I included the actual funding so you had an idea. It was broken down that every school received $16,231.25 to be able to support the work that's going on, and that was used for staffing. And then approximately 265 students were identified as needing support, but as we all know, in a classroom, that was just the September one. We will continue to any students that need support will be leveraging this resource as well too. And again, to mention, intervention continues on all the time. And so this is just part of it, but it gives additional funding and support inside the classroom. Like I said, it's dedicated 1 hour per day that the province has made that part of the framework, is that they have to have 1 hour a day dedicated to this work. And so again, it's contextual to the school based on bell times and all sorts of things and when they have students, but each of the students that was identified will be getting that 1 hour per day for 12 to 16 weeks. All the school plans are submitted to us, so we took a look at it and make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students, but also meeting the needs of the provincial governments and what they've said this is what the funding's for and this is what you need to happen. So we took a look at it. I'm very encouraged with the conversations that were happening in the schools and looking at, again, those foundational skills in literacy and numeracy and really focusing on them this year. So the grade 1 funding will be determined after February 7th. So that's an important piece as well too, that there'll be more of this happening, so it'll continue happening. And then from there, we'll take a look and we'll talk into our teachers that are responsible for the intervention and discuss the pros, the cons, what worked, what didn't work in this kind of format. So that's the update right now, and I'm sure I can share more with you once the post-assessment and give you the data on how our students did.
Thank you, Trustee Kuzik. We'll go to Trustee Gimber.
Just a quick question. Where it says there's dedicated 1 hour per day, what would the student otherwise be doing if they weren't working with that teacher?
classroom environment, right? So what they're usually doing in the classroom, and so this usually is coming from literacy and numeracy time that they're doing, so it's more focused attention on that. So we tried to map it that way. So they're not going to lose phys ed because we believe phys ed is very much important and things of that nature. So we try to focus around those times they would already be getting literacy and numeracy instruction.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments around the learning disruption funding update? I was just wondering, Mr. Kuzak, are any of these things new, or are these the same tests and processes that we go through, have always gone through, and we're just seeing different results prior to the pandemic?
So intervention is not new, and how we work with students on foundational literacy and numeracy skills are not new. How we work with students in the classroom and inclusive environment on supports is not new. What is new is the screeners that we do have. We're going to give those a go. So those screeners provided to us by Alberta Education. It's reflective potentially of the new curriculum, potentially as a resource identified to use. We'll see. So we decided to go ahead and use that. So that piece is new. What other piece is new is the extra staffing that we'd have in the building to be able to support that.
Thank you so much. Is there any other questions for Mr. Kuzak on that? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Kuzak.
More to come.
Yeah.
All right, I told you I would be quick, and that's if I'm too quick, let me know.
Okay.
The next piece is, and we'll wait for, there we go. I already provided an update due to COVID and things of that nature to have international students come in from other countries. The process over there, I'll outline some of those protocols we have in place, but it's been a successful year with international programming and what that has to offer our schools and our divisions, and it's gone well. So on the next slide, you'll basically see we have 58 students that have come to our division. These are almost full-time students. This is our busiest year that we've ever had. We have over 43.9 FTE, and if you look at the list of countries we're growing, so Azerbaijan, Austria, Belgium, Chile, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Spain, and Turkey. I had the privilege to pick a student up last week, and I'm going to say it was very interesting to see his excitement, his enthusiasm to come to this program, and it was from one of the countries that we don't always necessarily have students from, and just seeing the growth in Livingston Range is getting out there, if you will, is being able to demonstrate all we have to offer, and it was interesting seeing all these students on past powder keg. I drove by the other day, and they might have been, yeah, they were just going and ripping, is the word I'll use, on the slopes and taking full advantage of what we have to offer. And it's not just skiing. These students are all across our whole division, but I just want to make that known that it was a reminder that what we're doing is having impact beyond our borders, and it's very exciting. So if you look at the next slide, we try to get them sprouted amongst the schools. So CCHS has 6 students, Livingston has, and the Ski Academy has 7 students, Matthew Halton has 7 students, FP Walsh has 13 students, which is great. I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. We traditionally haven't had that many students at FP Walsh, so that's excellent. So, and then Willow Creek 16, and then JT Foster 9 students. So we're starting to just now taking applications, and again, it looks like another busy year next year. We're getting lots of opportunities. And because as a public, I want to let anybody in the Livingston area that has a homestay, please talk to me. Because we're getting a lot of students asking to go into the Ski Academy. We just don't have homes for them. Greg, all right, Mr. Trustee Long.
Oh, it's Greg. How many countries was there? I'm sorry, I should have written it down.
Back.
Can you back up?
Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14.
Thank you.
Yeah, and some of those are new. Like if you look right there, some of the new markets for us for sure is Belgium. That's a new one. Denmark. Lots of success out actually Denmark. They're very excited. France, we're working into. They're relatively new. We've worked with them the last couple of years. Italy is one that we're starting to see more. And then Japan and Mexico, we reconnected with them. And as you know, we have lots of Spanish students, and Turkey we've had as well too. But we've maintained those through the pandemic, maintained those connections and conversations. So. if we go to the next slide after this one, real quick, I just want to go over the protocols, just to make sure we're at, it's not much different than anybody traveling. It isn't any different, international students, that anyone would travel into Canada. They're under the same rules and regulations, but to give the board an update is that prior to arrival in Canada, they'll need to document negative COVID test 72 hours prior, and the boarding flights. And it's subject to COVID test upon arrival. Potentially, they have those random tests they do have, and many of our students have had to take those, right? And it's basically on the discretion of the customs officers when they go through. And then if they are tested, they're quarantined until they receive their test results. And it's usually emailed in 24 hours, but during Christmas time, it took a little bit longer just with the amount of volume. So, and then effective January 15th, some national travelers will previously allowed in it without fully vaccinated, now required to be fully vaccinated. And that's just some, and it's up to them. And that list is changing. It's fluid, but we are also obligated to follow that as well too. So yeah, so there'll be changes of testing, quarantine exemptions ongoing as we go through this, and we have people that are looking at that every day to make sure we're accomplishing that. But for us, most of our students they already came, or they'll come in February, right? So those are the things we're getting ready for, and those students have their Arrive Can app that'll help them track track what's going on and what they need to do. If they do get quarantined, if we go to the next slide, and just like any student in our division, next slide is just, we pick, first of all, I should say the process. So we pick up our students. So we're trying to make it as safe as possible, everyone involved. So we pick up our students. So that's why I was picking up the one student the other night. And we transport them to the homestay to decrease the amount of travel that's required from everyone. And we bring them to the homestay, and then obviously wearing masks and so being socially distanced as best we possibly can. They handle their own luggage, and then once they're in their home, if they were one of those random tests, they need to quarantine. We don't just leave them. Our homestay coordinators will continue to check in that day and every day to see how they're doing, and maintaining mental wellness and all those wonderful things for them being here. We want to make sure they're doing okay. So we continue that when they're here. So we have an influx student coming from semester 2. The orientation will be January 31st, where we talk about COVID, we talk about all the protocols, we talk about the expectations when they're here. We're going to do it virtually again, try to alleviate contact and social distancing. So yeah, and then we go over what the homestay requirements are, and the basic orientation we do, but we give a focus on how to be healthy and safety in our division right now. And then we support 24 hours a day. We say that, and it's relatively true, that we will get calls. I'll say I get some calls late at night, but that's okay. It's part of the job. And so we make sure that everyone's supported as best we can during these times. So again, very quick, I went through that presentation, but that, I believe, is it as far as international program. Oh, right there. It just talks about the phone calls and stuff like that, and where to get more information if we need to have it. So, okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cusack. Do we have any questions or comments from the trustees regarding our international students and the program, the update we've gotten? Trustee Long?
What a wonderful job you've done, international program.
Trustee Long, it's a whole team. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It is a whole team. We have 3 coordinators. We expanded our coordinators role. We have 3 now that are in as many communities as we possibly can get. I think that's the core of our program, is to have our own homestays and have them with our own parents and our own community members and stakeholders. And we have an admin assistant that is on all of this to be able to keep me organized, that's for sure. But and also the recruiting piece that it's been difficult to recruit students into the program with COVID, but we've leveraged some different opportunities, mostly virtual, but truly the connections we've had. And this program is from word of mouth. People that come here and experience what they experience have gone back and shared it with others. And it's growing in that they want to be a part of this as well too. So it's all our teachers, it's all our schools, it's our governance, it's everybody here that supported this division and supported this program to allow it to happen. That's made it successful. So, but thank you, Trustee Long. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Long. Do we have any other questions from trustees? Trustee Okay, thank you so much for this update and for your presentation, Mr. Cusack. We will now go to F3, which is Inclusive Education Presentation. Lisa Furukawa, Director of Learning and Support Services, will present to the board on inclusive education throughout the division. So we'd like to welcome Lisa and thank her for her patience at this time. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good to see you. I haven't seen you that you are well. Oh, there I am. I'm actually glad that I got to follow Chad, because when he's talking about early learning and he's talking about the homestays and international students, every single piece of that builds into inclusion and inclusive practices within our division. Within my portfolio is learning support, support services, early learning, behavior support, ESL, Southwest Collaborative Support, and teacher evaluations. Mostly today I'll be talking about learning support and English second language in Southwest. Some of you may know who were with us last year that we're in a 2-year collaborative project, Learning With and Learning From Jigsaw. And what that is it's whole group learning with our admin council, as well as individual coaching at our school level, so individual sessions, meeting the needs of the schools. What this has really supported us is different layers of school structures. They're consistent, they're intentional, they're embedded time to support not only our students and families, but also to support our teachers. So the collaborative team meeting really focuses in on key issues, whether it's around literacy or numeracy. And then from there, the school support team would be our FSL, Family School Liaison, Learning Support, and it focuses in more on specific student need. And then the case consult would be then more of that individualized, intensive support for a student, where we may involve additional agencies in a wraparound. One thing we've really been focusing on this year is shifting the mindset around behavior and social emotional learning. Digging into key issues, what we're doing is really looking at what are those root causes around literacy? What might those root causes be around numeracy or around social emotional behavior? As opposed to just trying to stop the behaviors, really digging in and looking at what are we able to do to support a continuum of support for our students. So when we think about flipping that process and we talk about moving from progressive consequences, which would be suspensions eventually, to a continuum of supports, we're able to support a lot more students and families before we get to that level where we're looking at suspensions. And instead of just stopping a behavior, we're able to look at what might the barriers be that we're able to establish for all students. And when we're working on this with our schools, we're really referencing back to the teacher quality standards and the leadership quality standards. And at the center of that is always optimal student learning. And we always say that the TQS and the LQS are the minimum standards. So within there, there's lots of focus on relationship, on connection, inclusion for all learners, as well as we're referencing a lot of the new materials and resources that are coming out from the government on relationships matter, mental health, well-being, continuing services. So really staying current with the current research that has come out since COVID. So developing a continuum of support, some of you might be saying, what are you talking about? What's a continuum of supports? So what a continuum of supports is all students, every single one of us here uses supports to be successful in our daily lives. I'll point one out right now. Nikki is the one who is operating my slideshow, but I always run my second slideshow just in case I forget what I wanted to say. So that is the support that I use. And we use supports all the time to keep us at that optimal level for learning. And by me just having this here, and other students, it just slowly reduces your anxiety. Go, yeah, I got this, and if I need it, it's here. So we're developing continuum of supports for literacy and numeracy. I'll be working with Chad's team in May. We've worked with Inspiring Leadership, and they identified their key issue that's taking up a lot of their time is around behavior and social emotional learning. So that's where we developed a continuum of supports. We just met with our learning support team, who are also assistant principals, and they wanted to focus on social emotional wellness and really digging in deeper and creating that support. And we'll have that ready to bring to senior leadership next week, and then that'll be available for our whole school division. And this here just is kind of an outline of what a continuum of support is. And lots of times when people think of inclusive education, they think, oh, that's for students who have disabilities or delays. Inclusive education is for every single student out there. That tier 1 is what you'll hear people talking about called universal strategies or universal supports. And those are the supports that are in every single classroom to support all types of learners. Every one of us here has individual needs and ways that we learn and ways that we are successful just as students. So what we really focus on is teaching every student all the different supports and strategies that are out there so they know how to access them on their own and they're not reliant just on the teacher for providing them. Last year when our pursuits opened, it really opened our eyes to realize that the students had these continuous supports in the classrooms, but they didn't always know what they were or how to access them. So that's our focus this year, is developing the continuum with teachers, with students, and with families. So no matter where you go, you have that ability to access what you need for your learning. Some of you may remember from last year, we are in a 6-part learning series with Shelley Moore, and it's on leadership and inclusion. So within that group, there's one administrator who's an Lrsd, as well as 2 additional classroom teachers. And the focus is on student agency, which what I talked about earlier is knowing what you need when you need it, purposeful and responsive planning, competency goals. And when you think about competencies, those are like the 21st century learning goals, what people are looking for in post-secondary or for employment. It has that balance between innovation, creativity, problem solving, and content. You need all of that within a balance for students to be successful as they leave our schools. And the universal supports, and then authentic assessment. And what I mean by authentic assessment is not just pencil and paper. It might be a video, it might be a drawing, it might be audio. So having students be able to share their learning in multiple venues, because when you think about it, when you leave school, how often, unless you're in the world of academia, are you passing in a paper to demonstrate you're successful in your job? Not very often. So we need to prepare our students for the world that they're entering into. And I put this one here. It actually made me giggle when I read it. James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits. I'm not sure if you're aware of who he is. But you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So when you think about how many times people have set goals and they fail, it's because their systems, their structures, their processes, their everyday habits weren't there to support getting to that goal. And that's where, as the division, we're really making sure we have those structures and processes in place for student planning, for continuum of supports, for our collaborative response, so that those structures and processes are in there to get to the ultimate goal, which is optimal learning and success for students. Last year, we intentionally made some changes. We had our LSTs in all schools, our assistant principals or principals, and that was purposeful and intentional because they have the most impact to influence a school around culture, academics, learning, and success. We have our Leading for Inclusion learning series, and I think I'm outlining that even though we're talking inclusion, it is about all learners, not students who have disabilities or delays. It's everyone included. Our Continuum of Supports is being written out this year. In the past, it was probably in teachers' minds and in teachers' classrooms. We're really making those visible to all learners in all schools. As well as across our division, we're using the MRA, the Measurable Results Assessment. And from our learning services team, we're really focusing in on sense of belonging and academic success from the student's point of view as well as from the parent point of view, and then using that context to be responsive and determine what our next steps are. Some of you may know about 2 years ago, Alberta Health Services no longer provides service in schools. Some of you, that might be new. So then what we did is the school divisions in the South, we collaborated together. We developed what's called Southwest Collaborative Services, and we hired our own SLPs, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, vision consultants, deaf and hard of hearing, and educational audiology to support our students in schools. If a student does have a medical need, Alberta Health Services will still provide concurrent services, but not in schools. So one thing for consideration is how do we maximize that service? So we want school teams to really take a look at, does it have an impact on literacy, on numeracy, on access, on communication? School teams then are the ones who determine what their priorities are. It's not health services determining. They determine, who do I need help with? Who am I unsure? How do I provide service to? Southwest also has virtual consultations. They have office hours, so anyone within our school division can call in between 2:30 and 4:30 on a Thursday with a question, just a general question about how do I support student learning in this context. A lot of people, when they think of speech language pathology, they think, oh, they just talk about communication, they just talk about sounds. So we're really wanting staff and everyone to really understand the expertise that is within our division. So with the speech language pathologists and occupational therapists, schools are now looking at inviting them to the table when they're collaborating about students, because they have far more expertise than just speech sounds or pencil grip. I mean, if you look through this list of areas of expertise, that is what our teachers and what our students are learning and responding to on a daily basis. Lrsd employs a full-time SLP, as well as through Southwest we contract 1.2 speech language pathologist, a 0.5 occupational therapist, and a 0.4 physiotherapist. As we talked about, inclusion is for all, and Alberta Education now funds us differently. They used to, well, for the last probably 10 years, they used to fund us based on the number of students with disability and delays. Now they fund us based on the student population and a couple other factors as well. But they still do collect data on students with significant delays or disabilities. So I did share the information here for the data that Alberta Education does collect. Now that is not percentage of our Lrsd students, that is percentage of the students who meet the Alberta Education coding criteria for significant or severe disability. And this is the one for mild to moderate disability, and as you'll notice, there's a significant number of students around communication. And why supporting communication is so important, it is the kind of the precursor or the foundations for literacy success. So we need students to have strong communication, strong language and vocabulary skills in order to be successful when they're moving into the school place and starting to learn to read. Now this is percentage of students in our division. So there's 7.4% of our students are English second learners. That's approximately the same as last year. At one point, we were anticipating a large influx of students moving into the Clarisholm area. At this point, we have not seen a significant influx, a number of families, but not a huge percentage. Like we were expecting that to double, triple. So it's slowly starting to happen, probably because of COVID. So we will be prepared for that. Did you have a question, Mr. Long? Oh, okay, sorry. I have reading glasses on, so I couldn't tell if you were looking at me or not. You were kind of blurry. Okay.
You can't read my mind.
What?
You can't read my mind.
No, I can't. That's why I had to ask. So in Livingston Range School Division, we always see ability. We take the DIS set of ability. You see a boy here skiing, but I want to give you a little background information. This is an elementary boy who was able to walk a short distance. When he's tired or the distance are too long, he travels in a wheelchair. He attends Livingston School, and he is part of the ski academy. The joy when he went up to the ski hill, riding that lift, coming down on his skis, and when he was too worn out to hop on that sled, to be with his peers, the joy of his peers, and just that sense of belonging, that it doesn't matter what your disability is. The environment is disabling you, not you. We'll take those barriers away and really create a space where you can belong and be a part of everyone, every student, every day. Don't press play yet. I want to give you a little background on this person too. So before I show you this video, this boy's in middle school. He used to have really poor attendance. He didn't want to go to class. By noon, he was calling his mom. He was sick. He was wanting to go home. If you looked at him, you would say he has low energy, and, you know, he often kind of appeared sad. I'll get you to play it now. not even sure if you knew which boy it was. It was number 3. I'll get you to replay it. This boy is on the basketball team. He attends every practice. He is in every single game. Kids high-five him in the hallways. He's in every single class. He now has peers. He has friends. So beyond just the joy of life, imagine what that has done to his academic performance, to him joining in the class, to peers seeing him as a valued member of his classroom. So being a part of a team and having that sense of belonging is foundational to academic success. And that's what inclusion is all about. It's okay. I do it all the time. I'm so glad it's you doing it, not me. And then we'll go to the next slide. And I shared this one, and I talk about it lots, that the single greatest difference between effective and ineffective organizations is the collective depth of understanding among employees about their work. And as Livingston Range, we've moved away from those 1 days of professional development to ongoing professional learning. For example, when I said having Shelley Moore support our Leading in Inclusion all year long, that is where you create change and create change in habit. That change in habit then creates new habits and creates processes and structures that then create change across our division. And I've come to the end.
Thank you very much. That put a smile on my face. Made my heart warm. That was really a good presentation.
Lisa, my son played against that boy, and
Don't make me cry.
I know, I'm like, it was a lot. And the feeling in the gym at that time, and when they first went out, you could see, like the other boys, trying to make sure that he was getting the opportunity to. He's maybe not the best shooter, not the best, and it didn't matter who was winning or losing that game by halftime. Both teams were working to make it an amazing game for him. And that's what Livingston Range is about. I know, I'm sorry.
At least they're tears of joy.
I know. And I don't know that boy in the ski academy, but that's what Livingston Range is about. So thank you for coming and presenting to us. Thanks, Craig, for jumping in there when I'm a little emotional. But
Obviously, you're doing a wonderful job of all the things you have there, responsibilities you have. And we really appreciate it, because I say you've choked one of us up and made the rest of us all smile. And not just the video, obviously all the things you're doing for our students. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Phenomenal job.
And once again, it's collaborative effort. I say that no one person can ever do it alone. You have to do it collaboratively.
thank you so much. We'll go to Trustee Hodges.
I was just going to touch on that it is very much a collaborative effort through everybody, and just all 3 of our presentations today showed the commitment to every student every day, and just and how we want to see all our kids succeed. So in whatever way that looks like, right? So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hodges. Is there any other trustees that have any questions or comments at this time around any of these programs or initiatives? No? Okay. So thank you. We just want to thank you so much for taking the time and coming in and presenting to us, and helping us be aware of what our inclusive education really does look like. And we appreciate it. We always enjoy hearing from you. So thank you, Lisa. Okay. Perfect. Okay, at this time, I just want to I want to mention a mistake that I made as chair. I'm still learning, so I just want to discuss what an emergent motion is. I, during the break, was trying to seek a little bit of clarity around an emergent motion and what that means, and when an emergent motion is brought forward, what that should look like. So I want to apologize to Trustee Toon and Trustee Gimber for not making sure that I was fully aware of that and how that looks. before this morning this was brought forward, and we had a vote and then discussed it. And then, so I want to let everyone know that when an emergent motion comes forward, especially when there's two movers, both of those movers should be able to speak to the emergent motion, not to the motion, but why that motion is emergent. And then there is time for the other trustees to not discuss the motion itself, but discuss why it does or does not fit the definition of an emergent motion. And I didn't allow Trustee Gimber to speak, and I didn't allow any other trustees to discuss why they felt like it did or did not fit as an emergent motion, and get clarity from the movers as to why they really felt like it should come as an emergent motion. And so I want to apologize and just ask for your guys' grace on, as I'm learning and getting to know this. I would, if the board is comfortable with it, I would like to just have Trustee Toon read out what that emergent motion was again, and allow him and Trustee Gimber to speak to it, and then allow any questions so that everyone understands why the board feels this is or is not an emergent motion. So Trustee Toon, I'll let you not speak to the emergent motion, but to just what I said there, and if you're comfortable with that or not.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the spirit of good process, I don't think we should have a discussion about the emergent nature of the motion. We've already voted on it twice. We've had a discussion about it. It wasn't approved for the agenda. Whether trustees were voting on it, whether the merits of the motion or the emergent nature, who knows at this point. I think it would be adversely influenced coming back later in the meeting and set a bad precedence for it. I have a notice of motion ready to go that can be on the next agenda. I would give that at the end of the meeting, but I think it's bad form to go back and have another discussion about it and a third kick at the can, so to speak, on this.
Thank you so much, Trustee Toon, and I appreciate that. Trustee Gimber, can I just get your thoughts on that?
I just want to thank you for acknowledging that maybe proper process or whatever. We're all learning. I know you and I are both learning. I don't really want to go back either right now, so
Okay.
we're good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, my apologies. Of course, emergent motions are brought forward because they are time sensitive. I appreciate that Trustee Toon feels comfortable making a notice of motion, and my apologies for, I had looked over some of this stuff last night thinking I was ready to, be ready for this meeting today, but this is a learning curve for me too. So thank you guys for your understanding and appreciation. We will not at this time revisit that emergent motion then, but we look forward to having a fulsome discussion and seeing that notice of motion from Trustee Toon. So after having that conversation, that brings us to our key messages from today. We've had a lot of excellent things. Yes?
We're missing the
F4. Thank you. Thank you very much. F4 was pulled out from the consent agenda regarding our professional learning. So Trustee Gimber asked that professional learning be pulled out. I will turn it over to you.
Is this for the
Where?
professional development first, or is it for Mr. Perry?
Sorry?
Me or Mr. Perry first? Which are we doing?
Let's go to you first.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so with regards to professional development, the first one that I wanted to request, January 17th. It's already passed. It was the AHS session. It was free, just a 1-hour session. I'm requesting approval for having attended that. I know it's in the past, but it came out after our last meeting. Do you want me to list them all off, or do we do one at a time, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can do,
One at a time, I think.
I would say you can put all of them out there, and then if we have any questions around any of them, we can discuss them at that time, and then we'll open up to other trustees that may have.
Okay. Then upcoming on February 15th from 9 till 11:30, McLennan Ross is having their 2021 year in review. It is also free. It's a virtual seminar that's going to cover the last year, a summary of the most significant and interesting cases impacting Alberta school authorities in the areas of labor and employment law, affecting teachers and non-teaching staff, human rights, OHS updates, student safety, psychological harassment, etc., etc. So there's that one. That's also free. March 14th to 16th is the CAS FNMI Education Gathering. That one, I believe all trustees are seeking approval for that one. And then March 27th to 28th is National Congress on Rural Education in Canada. It's normally held in Saskatoon, but it will be a hybrid event, so I would be seeking virtual approval for that one when more details come out. And actually, I should have asked before, but April 8th to 9th, there is an inclusion seminar. The conference is a time for families, educators, and service providers from all over the province to deepen their knowledge and commitment to assisting children and adults with developmental disabilities to live fully inclusive and meaningful lives in their community. That one, the pricing hasn't come out yet, but it was between $50 and $70 last year. So, and then the last one is
Trustee Gimber, sorry. Who is hosting that one, the inclusive one?
inclusionalberta.org.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it sent out. I just couldn't remember who was hosting it. So yep. Inclusion Alberta, thank you.
And the final one is April 24th, the Alberta School Councils Conference, AGM. As a member of the Regional School Council Committee, I think it would be prudent for me to attend the AGM, again virtually. And that's it. That's
perfect.
Enough.
Thank you so much. Just on your first two, those are both virtual, is that correct? The McLennan Ross one and
they
the AHS that already happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They're all virtual with the exception of the FNMI. March 14th
and
to 16th.
Potentially the AGM for school
no,
doors?
that has been confirmed as virtual.
For digital. Okay. Virtual. Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to seek approval? Lori, Trustee Hodges, and then we'll go to Trustee Sangwitz.
I just, I have a question around the professional development. I don't know if we got any answer back yet, but there was the possibility, and I know we don't need approval for this, but it should be on the PD part of it. The ASBA trustee orientation, they had a date set for the 31st, I believe it was, but have we had any
that's confirmed.
Response back for that?
Yep, that's confirmed. There is part 2 of trustee orientation. And okay. It's virtual. So because it's ASBA, it's not, you don't need approval for it, but it has been confirmed.
Okay.
Yeah, by the end of our last meeting, I had gotten that email, so sorry, I should have maybe sent an email out so you had it in writing, but I will do that. Trustee Yegos?
I was wondering if the rural symposium, if Trustee Toon has heard yet, if it's virtual or
still in person.
I can get it.
Still in person at this time.
It's okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Sangwitz?
I would also like to attend the ASBA Alberta School Council Conference, AGM, virtual.
Okay, on April 24th. Okay. Trustee Trustee Hodges?
I would like to just maybe put my name down for the McLennan Ross one. I don't know for sure yet if I can attend. I need to check my schedule, but I just would like approval if I'm going to go.
Perfect. Just for clarity, is there any trustees who are not seeking to go to the CAS FNMI on March 14th, 15th? Okay, so that one will be all trustees seeking approval for that. Trustee Long? Sorry. It is virtual. Is that right?
I think they said at the end of this month they were making a decision.
So that's yet to be determined. Go ahead, Trustee Yugos.
If it's virtual, I'll go. If it's in person, I won't.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, just for clarity, if you're ever approved at a meeting to go to trustee or to PD and you don't make it, that's okay. You just don't put it on your timesheet. Trustee Long?
Should we go ahead and have rooms booked for that? And is there a registration fee? I know we talked about this, but my memory's not good.
I can find that link and resend it.
Yeah, we'll get all the details out for that, Greg, and once we know if it's virtual or not, then we can look at booking rooms, potentially. Thank you. Is there any other, yeah, Trustee Gimber?
There is registration fee. That one is, it has $590 per person, including GST, from March 14th to 16th.
Perfect, thank you. I would like my name put down also for the AGM on April 24th for Asba. Okay, is there any discussion around any of these? Oh, sorry, Trustee Stanglitz.
Can I also have my name down for the National Congress and Rural Education fees?
I beg your pardon? Yeah, we'll bring it. Okay, thank you. Is there any other conversation around PD? Any questions around relevance on certain PD pieces that have been people are seeking at this time? Okay, perfect. So all in favor? That's moved. And instead of key messages, we're going to go to F5. I moved Mr. Perry and then completely removed him right off the sheet entirely, which I don't know. I know he doesn't love public speaking, so maybe he was okay with it. But so we'll go to F5, which is the Lrsd fact sheet on reserves, and get update from Mr. Perry at presentation. Thank you.
Sounds good. I'm so easily forgotten. I get it. But Nikki, if you could go to the website, our division website, just so I can demonstrate how individuals at home or trustees can go and find this documentation. So you're going to click, you look at our division, you're going to click on the red, plus sign, and then you're going to go down to finance. And then you'll scroll to the bottom and it's broken out by year. So the one we're going to look at is in 2020-21. So these are the three documents that we typically have in here. We have a budget report, which is the first document that in the timeline. And then you have an audited financial report. And then after that, we have the fact sheet on reserves, which identifies where we stand at the end of that audited financial year. And so I'm going to go through that document with you today, so you can just click on that and bring that up. I've referred to this a few times, or a couple times in the past. Once with the audit committee after we were going through the financial statements, and so we went through this document, and then we went through it at the board meeting, mind you, briefly, because you were getting the audit report as well. So I know Trustee Hodges thought it would be important to have a look at it in a little bit more detail. I'll try not to take too much time, but I will go through it. I'll just talk real quick. Sorry, I'm just getting my notes up here. So, like I mentioned before, this document is a factual document. It identifies a few things, and I'll go through that with you with regards to reserve. The board actually approves how we will use reserves when they go through the spring budget process. So the budget that we're following for the current year was approved in May of 2021. the process for the provincial government or for the Minister of Education is that they approve our request to use reserves. And so that was also part of the process. I'm not sure whether that will be part of the process going forward. There's word that that might not be, but because of the changes in the legislation or in the regulations. But at this point, that's the process that we followed. The minister did approve on the use of the reserves. This is monitored on a quarterly basis by the audit committee and then presented to the board. So one of the main things is to see where we actually stand at this point in time. Are we on budget? And are we in line with what we said we were going to as far as the reserves that we were going to use? And the first quarterly report we brought back that we're right on line. We're actually very close to where we budgeted. So we budgeted for the use of reserves of a $1.488 million, right? If you remember, there were certain reasons and rationale as to why that. So we were pretty much a quarter of the of that, which would make sense after the first report, which is 25% of the year. So anyway, after the financial statements are completed, we identify where we sit with the reserves. We bring that to the audit committee, and then we provide the rationale as to where we are, why we're there, and what potential and future plans we would use those reserves for. And we communicated with the audit committee and then with the board on that as well when we brought it in December, that we were looking at having a transition fund used for the surplus that we had currently experienced in that financial year. So that was one of the things that was set up and approved by the board as we approved the audit of the financial statements. Okay. So that's kind of the rationale and the discussion around it. We will go through a budget coming up here shortly, and we'll identify, and the board will approve how we determine we're going to use reserves going forward at that time. We will, as we go through the monitoring process with the audit committee, seek feedback and input from the audit committee on that area, because they look into it a lot more detailed with regards to the review of the quarterly report. And that'll be part of our process as we develop a budget to bring before the board that we would look to be having approved. Okay, so the document itself, number one is just identifying that what the definition of accumulated surplus is. And I won't go through all of these because you have the ability to go there and read it in more detail. But it just gives a definition of what accumulated surplus is. Number two identifies the different components of accumulated surplus. So some are funds that we hold, some are funds that we've expended already, and there's just a residual value and they haven't entirely been amortized. So investment in capital tangible assets. We've actually spent money, and as we amortize it and recognize the expense, we also recognize a reduction in our investment in capital assets. Endowments are dollars put aside from donations and things of that nature. The two areas that typically are the areas that are measured mostly by the provincial government, and I know this came about because the provincial government has talked about the level of reserves out in the jurisdictions. The two that are typically monitored are unrestricted surplus and operating reserves. Unrestricted would be something that isn't restricted internally by the board in any way, shape, or form, and it's held as additional funds. Operating reserves are funds that have been designated for specific operating purposes or held for contingencies and things of that nature. So I anticipate that the government will come out in this upcoming budget and identify what's an appropriate level of reserves. They've talked about it for a little while, and they've said they're monitoring it, and I think they'll come out in this upcoming budget. We've always used 5% as a threshold because of the process that Asba went through to determine what would be an appropriate level. And of course, many jurisdictions are big and small, and they're all different shapes and sizes. And so a small reserve held by a smaller jurisdiction will have a higher percentage based on their expenditures than what a large board like Calgary Board of Education would have. Even though their reserve is significantly higher, it's a smaller percentage of what their operating expenditures are. So as Boa said, 2 to 8% at that time. Alberta Education came out at one point and said 5% was the target. And I think that was based on the Auditor General's recommendation. But now they're re-looking at that, and I think more information will come out. So if we go to the next, number 3, sorry, Nikki. Number 3 identifies what our actual reserves are. So unrestricted, again, the first number is what we ended off in August of 2021. And the number in brackets is not a negative, it's the prior year's number, okay? So if you look at unrestricted, we have 0 at the end of this last financial year. The year before that, we had $106,000 in that area. Operating reserves is significant, is usually the highest reserve in there. And you can see that it's broken out into school and instruction, maintenance, transportation, and board and system admin. And you can see the change from the previous year to the end of this most recent financial period. We had a surplus, so you can anticipate that our operating reserves would go up. The majority of that was in instructional, school and instruction. That's where we indicated we were setting up those resources to be able to transition in our upcoming year when we anticipate that we'll lose significant funding in revenue. So a transitional period, which is what the government initially was indicating they were going to provide, but they didn't because they maintained the revenues at the same level for the last 2 years. So maintenance went up a little bit, transportation went up a little bit, board and system admin went down a little bit, but overall it's up. Capital reserves are dollars that are held for the intent of capital purchases. So if I take resources and I buy copiers from the school and we amortize them over a 5-year period, that expenditure in any given year is not cash, but we actually take those dollars that were set aside for that, and because they do actually come out of your budget. So there is the dollars, we put those aside and we build a capital reserve. So as we amortize those copiers, the reserve gets bigger in capital reserve. So at the end of 5 years, we have the ability to repurchase copiers, if that makes sense. So as we amortize, we set that aside, and that's what happens with capital reserves. So capital reserves, as we're amortizing our equipment, potentially buildings, if they're non-supported, this doesn't apply to school buildings, we would increase our reserve, and then when we expend those dollars, then we would be reducing capital reserves. And so in this last year, we actually had an overall increase to our reserves of $387,000. We had an increase to our operating reserves of $947, but that was reduced by the decrease in capital reserves of $559, which, if you remember, was part of our capital expenditures for buses and for the property out in the Crow's Nest Pass. So I won't go through in all the details for all the different areas, but I just wanted to make sure you have an understanding of how to read that document and have an understanding of what we did in the prior year. So if you go down to number 5, I guess nope, don't go to 5 yet. There's a visual. You can see where we came from as far as reserves. And the first is unrestricted surplus and operating reserves. Remember, I said those 2 items, what the Alberta Education and most stakeholders will monitor closely. So you can see we had a trend downward, and then we had a slight increase in 2021, and that was because, without getting into too much information, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why we had a surplus, as to why dollars weren't expended in the prior year, additional funding given, inability to hire, savings in travel and things of that nature. So again, those dollars were put into reserves for the potential of a transition. So if you go to the next graph, I guess, this is capital reserves. Okay, so you can see the trend there. The reason there's a big shift going from 2016, 17, 18, and then all the way up in 2019 is because we used to hold capital reserves in our unrestricted. And so if you looked in the other chart, it went high, high, low. We actually transferred those to capital reserves to be in the appropriate area. And so that was the big transaction there. Yep.
Just on the above chart here, where we're seeing that trend in, our reserves really shrinking down. Part of that is due to the fact that the government was changing the percentage that they wanted us to hold in reserves. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were aiming to be 5% or lower than 5% over the last few years.
And back in 2016, an acceptable number was closer to that.
Yeah,
higher percentage, so.
Yeah,
okay.
it would have been higher than that just
Yeah.
because we had capital reserves in the unrestricted. And
Yeah.
when we changed that, then it would be more in line with what the percentage was.
Okay.
And I'll go through the percentages here shortly, but
Thank
that's
you.
exactly right. So even in 2021, we anticipated in being within that 5% level, but obviously when you have a surplus for those reasons that I mentioned, that's not what the end result was. And to tell you the truth, for the majority of the jurisdictions in the province, I can't speak to the real big ones, I'm not sure, but for the majority of the school divisions in the south, they all had surpluses, and it was for the exact same reason. So, okay, we can go to number 5 now. Okay, so I just put the same information in a percentage just because it's easier to monitor as you, the one thing that I noted that I should probably do is put a total at the bottom to identify what the total percentage is. It would help me in explaining it as well. But unfortunately, I don't have it on this one at this point. So this is looking at operating reserves, unrestricted and operating reserves. And so in the, let me just catch up in my notes here. We were actually, at the end of 2020, we were at 5.76. And so when we anticipated the budget of reducing reserves, at that point we would have been under the 5% threshold, and we went up. We're actually currently at, if you add all those things on the right-hand side under 2021, that adds up to 7.19 or 7.2. That is where we stand. It's not a significant difference than the 5%, but if 5% is the threshold, then it's over, and then stakeholders and Hubbard Education would be looking at it and wondering why. And so that's the level that we're at. You can go to the next chart, and this is just the same thing in a percentage. So you can see in 2019, 2020, we were very close to the 5%. And then in those 2 years, I believe we had planned deficits in those years as well. And so they were not huge, but we had a little reduction in 2020 and a larger reduction in 2019. 2021 obviously went up to 7.2. Okay. Okay, so how will Lrsd use current reserves in 2021-22? I do have a typing error in here, but and I'll identify what that is. But this is what the budget identified in the spring, so the May 2021. This is what we identified we would use the reserves for. And so this is, as we go throughout the year, this is what we monitor against and see where we're at, whether our costs are high, whether they're low, where we sit, what other decisions we have to make. The typo is under cover maintenance deficit was only 45,000 instead of 278. I'm not sure why it says 278 there, but so that total would add up to the 1.488 that we, or that the board approved as the budget in May of 2021. So the current budget, if we follow and were exactly what the budget called for, we would actually be at 4.17% of total expenditures. We would be under the 5% threshold that we know of at this point. This would also allow us to the ability to use 2% or 1 million of operating reserves to transition during the reduction of the 2 million in next year, and that to this point is the plan that we're going forward with. But it would be a recommendation to the board through the budget that we bring to you in May. So that's where you would approve that. Trustee Toon has a question.
Thank you. Really appreciate all the work that goes into this. I think it's great to share with stakeholders where all the dollars sit. Would we be on track right now to achieve that? At this point in the year, we're pretty far in, and I know a lot of expenses happen more at the start. So,
yeah. So according to the first quarter, we were right. Lots can happen in a quarter, right? I continue to monitor it monthly, although I bring it to the board on a quarterly basis. And to this point in time, we still continue to be in line with where we're at. Again, it's only as good as the information that I have. Lots can happen. I mean, people can hold off and not spend things, or they can spend more than what I would have anticipated them. But at this point in time, we're aiming to be right on target with the reserve. Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate that news because I know as we meet with the minister and have discussions with it, it's something she's constantly bringing up because we're all asking for additional resources for a lot of the programs that were talked about, like learning gap and a lot of pandemic related things. And at the same time, they're saying, well, your reserves are going up. So that I think this is really great that we're using today's dollars for today's kids like we intended to. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a great comment. Yeah, and I know it's amongst the trustee circles and the minister in discussion with the trustees. It's also discussion amongst, I'm assuming, CAS and I'm assuming Asba as well. And so it's, yeah, we are aiming for that. We know that there's potential savings in certain areas when we've also made commitment to spend in other areas to ensure that we're close to that amount to do exactly what you just said, use the dollars today to support the students today. So I think the last page, it just identifies, and there's not a lot of detail in here, but it talks about transition in some scenarios. It also talks about what that we would maintain, and it doesn't give numbers to it, but a reasonable contingency in different areas. So, I mean, having no reserves, I've been there in another jurisdiction. Not a good place to be. We do have to have some funding to be able to respond to emergent items, be able to plan initiatives and things that are in the best interest of students. And so having no reserves is not a good thing either. And so part of the process is identifying what's reasonable. And so this document just identifies that the board agrees that we would have reasonable contingencies in certain areas. So for certificated staffing, support staff, complex needs, they're all mentioned there. I won't go through them all, but once reserves are used, they're gone. And the only way you can build a reserve back up is to not spend all of your budget for that year, and that's not ideal. Like Trustee Toon identified, we want to use the dollars that we get today for the students today, but we also want to be prepared for times when there might be some emergent nature items and things of that nature. So it's a balancing act. We'll take into consideration what the minister says in the upcoming budget. We'll take into consideration the feedback from our audit committee and the board, and we'll present a budget going forward with regards to those plans. But anyway, that's my report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Do we have any other questions or comments from trustees around the numbers we've been shown or the differences in reserves, anything like that? Trustee Hodges?
I know this has always been a key part of the board, making sure that our reserves were in line with the provincial government. And so I know the audit committee takes great care when we go through this, and so I appreciate sharing this extra bit with everybody and just showing where we are. And so when we come to the audit committee and then the board, I think there'll be really good discussions, and I think we're in a really good financial position right now to support our kids, so thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Hodges. Any other comments from any other trustees at this time? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Perry, for bringing this forward so that we could discuss it and make sure that we all have an understanding around what the reserves look like, why we have them, and why they're so important to have while maintaining that we are spending today's dollars for today's students. So thank you very much. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, that brings us to our key messages. Yes, okay, perfect. So we will discuss our meeting today and 3 key messages that the trustees would like to take out to our school councils and share with others. Trustee Stanglitz?
I'd like to share the learning disruption funding update with the school councils.
Thank you. She said that she would like to share the learning disruption funding update. Is that correct? Yep. Yep. Sorry, you're very soft-spoken, so just don't be afraid to put the mic right up there. But I was just double checking that is the one you were referring to, right? Okay, so the learning disruption funding update. Trustee Toon, did you have your hand up? No? Okay, sorry. Trustee Long, oh, there it is. Trustee Long.
Board meetings to be live streamed.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very relevant and important. Trustee Hodges.
We usually, we usually do just a little caption on our presentations that were presented to us today. So I think that's important to have just some key components of each presentation to share with our school councils. I'm wondering, I don't know if this is appropriate, if the board will approve it or not, but I had a conversation with Trustee Gimber, who sits on the committee for our regional council of regional school council, and they've put together a really great presentation, or not presentation, but a newsletter that I think is really important to our school councils. And I'm wondering, even though it wasn't it didn't make it into the package for this board meeting, it's also very important to get it out in a timely manner. And so I would like it to be part of our key messages if it could be. I had a conversation with Trustee Gimber if she wants to expand on it at all, but.
Okay, Trustee Gimber, did you want to add to that?
Well, I'll add that we're always looking for parental encouragement to have parents join school councils, and maybe the newsletter will help. So any opportunity we have to get the regional school council newsletter into people's hands, we will take advantage of that.
Okay, any thoughts on that, Trustee Toon?
I think it's a great idea going forward. Might be helpful to have it be part of the consent agenda, and that way it's included in the package and we can have a look at it beforehand. Appreciate the work on that. Thank you.
Any other comments on that one? Okay. Yeah, Trustee Yagos.
I was just going to say, it was very impressive. So I'd like to thank the two trustees, Jocelyn and Carla, for doing up that newsletter. And I think presenting it to our councils will be at least they could see a lot of things that are happening. So thank you to them.
Go ahead, Trustee Hodges.
I just wanted to add just one more thing in that newsletter too, is that I would encourage, when you're at your school councils, to share it with all parents. Ask the principal if they could possibly share that out to all parents, so that hopefully they can gain an understanding of maybe what our school councils are, and would like to be able to, like Carla stated, Trustee Gimber stated, that it's an important role for parents to be part of. And so I think it's just a phenomenal job they've done, and just why didn't we do it sooner?
Perfect. Thank you so much. If there's no further comments around that, is there any other? That's 3, so good job. Okay, so we'll take those as our key 3 messages. We are going to break for lunch, and I'm sorry that we are taking a late break for lunch. Trustee Toon?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick notice of motion here, and I'll send it off to Nikki as soon as I read it out. The recommendation that the Board of Trustees support student and community mental health and well-being by recommending to administration spectators be allowed at sporting events following the provincial guidelines. Be it further resolved that stakeholders be consulted on any changes going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. And notice of motion means it will be coming to our next board meeting. So you will get that sent off to Nikki, and we appreciate that. So with that, sorry, Trustee Toon, is that just coming from you or Trustee Gimber as well? Both. Okay, so again, that will be coming from both Trustee Toon and Trustee Gimber. Thank you. Okay, so we will take a break for lunch and come back at 1 o'clock. Let's say 1 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
We going in camera after lunch?
We are going to go in camera after lunch.
So do you want a motion to go into camera, or do we have
Sure.
to come back in here afterwards?
That's true. We might not look as good after eating. Okay. Is there someone who would like to make the motion to go in camera at 1 o'clock then? Trustee Stankiewicz? Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank Thank you guys for helping me limp through this meeting today. I appreciate it.